If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. These are the only ways I know it. Is there any other way? Often rejected for her peculiar style, her tendency towards oddness, is Emily Dickinson the original corrupted poet, I wonder? Well, she stuck to her guns. Not to be noticeably contentious, I think, but because she was, as Gertrude Stein might have it, changing the things seen. Is there any other way to say it? Well, we gave it a go. I'm Nick Stringer. This series has been I Know That Is Poetry. Thank you to all our wonderful contributors. And to cap it off, here are Corrupted Zone, Fiona Larkin and Michelle Penn on their favourite Emily Dickinson poems.
For each ecstatic instant, we must an anguish pay, in keen and quivering ratio to the ecstasy. For each beloved hour, sharp pittances of years, bitter contested farthings, and coffers heaped with tears. How to pick out a single Dickinson lyric? Inevitably, the long-lapsed Catholic in me gravitated towards this one. It's payback time, again. Dickinson doesn't contrast ecstasy with agony, but with anguish, a word which seems to me to imply an open-ended pain. Both her ecstasy and anguish are grounded in the physical world, though. The joy and the punishment are played out in hours and years, in human rather than heavenly time. She lays on those penalties quite heavily in the second stanza. Is momentary pleasure worth such suffering? Perhaps not. But the nature of tears is equivocal, arising from both joy and sorrow. So I return to that ecstatic instant and maybe reconsider. I also hear Dickinson's influence in an old favourite from sixth form days, Auden's Lullaby. Every farthing of the cost, all the dreaded cards foretell shall be paid, but from this night, not a whisper, not a thought, not a kiss, nor look be lost. I love Dickinson's use of language. A statistical term, like ratio, is matched with adjectives keen and quivering, more applicable to ecstasy itself, and the sound too, with the languorous vowels of ecstasy and beloved, challenged by the tight retorts of pittances and bitter. What I admire most, I think, is the poise of this poem. The speaker walks a tightrope, ecstasy and anguish suspended from either end of her balancing pole.
Faith is a fine invention for gentlemen who see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. Emily Dickinson's Faith is a Fine Invention is only 4 short lines. Its regular meter and pronounced end rhyme, see and emergency, echo religious hymns, a rhythm Dickinson often uses. And of course, the first word is faith, one of her signature topics. What strikes me most about the poem is its voice, that ironic humor, faith being a fine invention, but microscopes being prudent. Dickinson satirizes faith as a grand abstraction, putting the word in quotation marks, then suggesting it's the invention of gentlemen who see, the strict Calvinist ministers of her upbringing, perhaps. She gently pokes fun at faith, contrasting it with the more tangible human invention, microscopes. But Dickinson doesn't describe microscopes with superlatives. She calls them prudent. This suggests that examining an emergency closely and practically is vital, and that observation this intense might mean accepting the limits of faith, at least in some circumstances. Considering Dickinson wrote this poem in about 1860, at a moment of intense religious revival, any faith versus science opposition might seem rebellious. Yet Dickinson, the famous recluse, was well educated and deeply interested in both faith and science. She wrote through the microscope of her knowledge and her imagination to explore the world and its emergencies, both inside and beyond her four walls. I know that faith is a fine invention is poetry, because on every reading, its meaning shifts and opens new possibilities. Its 4 lines intrigue me, challenging me to delve into my own world through my own microscope.